Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Save Your Sanity series, the series all about saving time and getting shit done. Today we have a super special guest with us. We have Sarah Yip, who is the Group CEO of Kease International. Sarah is on a mission to enable 1 million leaders to leave a legacy of positive leadership. The impact and legacy she wants to leave is driven by a desire to see organizations achieve business success by putting people first. Sounds pretty good. Hey Sarah, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, getting there. It's midway through the day for me. So I'm working through my giant list. So today we're going to be talking about boundary setting, aren't we? What do you reckon?
Yes.
Good thing to do?
That sounds great. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most common topics that get brought up during my coaching sessions. So I'm very passionate about being able to talk about this topic.
Yeah, well, we're in the right spot then. So
yeah,
let's start at the start then. Why is it important to set boundaries as small business owners, or as anybody?
Yeah, I think as small business owners and even as an employee in an organisation, I think it's important to set boundaries because we are not a work self and a home self. Those two things overlap. And we actually have multiple relationships that overlap. So there are demands on our time. So there are friends, there's families, there's social commitments, there's yourself and being able to honour your own desires. Then perhaps there's children, and then there's your boss, and then you've got stakeholders. And everybody wants a piece of your time and your energy. And if we're not careful, those boundaries start to overlap. And when they do, more often than not, what gets eaten away is yourself and your own identity and your own needs. And so when we don't protect our boundaries, one of the holes that we can end up falling into is waking up one day and asking ourselves, where am I? Who am I? And what am I doing here? And so that's the reason why it's so important to, number one, identify what those boundaries are. Number two, make sure that we're engaging in such a way that we're honouring those boundaries.
That's serious stuff. We're diving right in there,
right into it.
So important. I think it's something that we really miss. We're kind of trained to be nice, helpful people who go out their way for other people, and that's an admirable quality to have. But it sounds like what we're doing is leaving ourselves behind in the process, which can't be great.
Yeah, so I'm always about, so one of the analogies that I use with people is that it's wonderful to be a lighthouse for others, to shine a light in order to guide a path for them. And that's how I see being helpful. But at the same time, if you're not topping up your own kerosene for a lighthouse, I think is the gas that they use in it, or if you're not monitoring your own light bulbs and looking after yourself in that space, you're not going to be much use for others. You're not going to be able to shine brightly, to be able to guide a path, to be able to help other people. So it's this idea of making sure that we're looking after our own lighthouse in order to be able to shine for others.
Fabulous. So how do we do it? Where do we start?
Where do we start? So the first thing that we've got to do is to identify our values and work out what it is that we value, what it is that we want to engage in life, and what legacy that we want to leave. So who am I? What matters to me?
Yeah.
And quite often when I do an exercise with the people that I coach, I ask them, what matters to you? And they say, oh, family matters to me. And the next question that I ask them is this: over the course of the month, can you honestly tell me that you spent 20 minutes of quality time with the top 5 people that are most important in your life? And when most people are honest with themselves, usually they can tick off 3, but they can't honestly tell me that they've done 20 minutes of quality time with their top 5 most important people. Now, that says a lot, because while on one hand we say we value you, you're important to me, and these can be our family and our friends, on the other hand, the decisions and the choices that we're making aren't actually honouring that. And so a really quick tip I like to give people is just map out your top 5 people. I always say if you've got 6 kids, just bound them into one, don't start choosing. Bound them into one, children.
Lifetime scarring for that one. Well, it's like
yeah, because otherwise that's a different topic altogether.
Yeah.
But yes, so you look at that, and then you just make sure that you start off and look at your calendar for the month ahead, and actually block out some time and dedicate. So tomorrow morning, I've carved out some time, 3 hours in my morning. I'm just going to spend some one-on-one time with my daughter. It's important to me that I do that. The reason why I'm doing that is that last Saturday I was working. This coming Saturday I'll be working. Tomorrow morning is her ballet lesson, and I'm choosing to take those 3 hours just to spend one-on-one time with her. I know that's not always possible for other people, and it's not the duration of time either. It's being present in that moment while you're with that person that matters so much.
Quality over quantity. So like carving out that time and then sitting on your phone answering emails is not exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, absolutely. And people crave connection. And you see this in little children where they'll come up to you and they'll demand your attention. And a classic example is when you're trying to cook dinner, right? Yeah. Or you're trying to get something done. And they're mum, 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 mum. And what they're craving is not your attention, they're craving connection. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, because until that connection need is met, that person will keep coming back to you because that's what they're craving. And so a really important boundary setter is actually making sure that you have that connection point, genuine connection. One of the things I used to do when my kids were really little is that I'd spend one-on-one time before I would go and cook dinner. And they'd actually be telling me, go away, mum, I'm done with you now. So go and do your thing that you want to do. And I think that's a really important technique to be able to tap into, is understanding that people crave connection, not your attention.
Oh, and that's not just children either. That's everybody. It's not unique to toddlers.
Not unique to toddlers. And I've done this study a number of times now whenever I've run workshops. And quite often when you ask young leaders in particular, or leaders in general, what's one thing that you really miss? And the thing that they miss the most is a genuine sense of connection. And you can see that because people are trying to make that connection. And one of the things that we've seen in terms of our mental wellness series that we ran during COVID was what social isolation has done for people's sense of connection and the importance of that. When something is very rare, it becomes a valuable commodity. So connection is actually a massive influencing tool, number one. And number two, it's a massive negotiation tool, because if you're actually able to give something of high value, which is a sense of connection to others, it becomes a valuable part of your relationship.
So cool. I'm gonna spend the rest of the day just kind of chewing on that and thinking about my own relationships and how that fits in. You know, we've done a couple of other interviews so far on, you know, time management and time blocking and how important that is to get the balance right. But this is the fundamentals of that, isn't it? Is putting in the most important stuff first, which is your connections with people. Sounds about the size of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the reason why it links back in with boundary setting is that when you're able to make that genuine connection and people feel, and this is a really important part, that other person feels like that they've been connected to, you'll actually see that they don't need that much time and of your attention. So you're actually able to push those boundaries back by engaging in meaningful connection. So it's actually a time saver. People think, oh, if I'm going to give that person some attention, it's going to take up too much of my time. The very fact that you're pushing them away is actually taking up more of your time and energy to push them away, only for them to rebound back again.
That's true. I can attest to that with my toddler, trying to get her in a car seat. You let her do it, she's fine. You try and help her, and it's a 20-minute ordeal. So you might as well just let her do it and take the extra 3 minutes over it.
Absolutely.
What was I going to say? I forgot. Oh yes, so we've got the connection part of it. Are there any other elements of boundary setting that we need to think about as a starting point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll come back to our values as well. And one of the models that I like to use is to have values-based decision making. So understanding where am I choosing to invest my time, where am I adding value, and are they actually in line with the values that I believe in? So one of my big values is making sure that wherever I put my energy, it's making a difference to other people, because my fundamental mission is to be able to make a positive impact on 1 million people. So whenever I get invited to engage in a keynote, do a podcast, to pick up an activity, would you come and volunteer here? My question always comes back down to, is this meeting my mission? Is this actually in line with the values of what I want to be doing? And if they're not, then I'll politely decline. Thank you very much for your invitation. It's not in line with the path that we're heading towards. Alternatively, something like what you're doing here, and I can see it's going to help a lot of people, I'm more than happy to say yes and volunteer my time for that, because I know that that will help me in achieving my mission and my values as well. What we find with a lot of people that I do coaching with, and this is where boundary setting gets hard, is that they don't know what their life mission is, and they don't know what their values are. They think they do, but when you drill down a little bit further, they actually don't. So a really good question to ask yourself is, why? Why am I doing it? And for what purpose? So, you know, what's the legacy that you want to leave? What impact would you like to make? And it starts making decisions really, I can make decisions just like that, because I know, are they in line with my values? No, they're not. Right, move on. So it's actually very easy and quick for me to do that.
Yeah. Do you think that's taken a lot of years of practice though? Like it didn't necessarily just happen for you?
No, it didn't happen. I probably wrestled it with that between the ages of 22 and 27 before I landed on something, good 5 years of solid reflection, understanding, and then also having, and this is I think the third element of it, is having the confidence to be able to say no, right? And no in a really respectful manner.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I did this is I had a little mantra that I taught myself, and the mantra is, every time I say yes to you, and you is everybody else, I'm saying no to me. Now, this sits under a framework of understanding that there is no work-life balance. It's a work-life trade-off. Every time we choose to spend time doing one thing, we're trading off and doing something else.
Gotcha.
So an example might be, if I'm going out partying on a Friday night, I'm not doing something that might be adding value to me. So it might be that I'm not going to the gym that night. So it's a trade-off. It's not a balancing act at all, right? Because you're not going out and partying and going to the gym, unless there is this concept now. I don't know.
I don't get out much. The kids these days.
I don't get out much either. It's the idea that you're trading things off. And I think this is really important when we talk about things like prioritization, right? Especially if you're being delegated to and you're receiving work to do, and looking at that list of priorities, the question always has to be, what am I trading off? As a small business owner, sometimes it's the business that you take on. I've had to say no to business before because I wasn't willing to trade off on the other accounts that I had at that point in time. So I think understanding what your trade-off point is really important. And I stuck that mantra on my desk for a good 4 years there. Every time I say yes to you, I say no to me. And then turning around and saying, I can't give up one of these priorities. I'm not willing to give up one of these priorities in order to say yes to you.
It's not always can. Sometimes it should be won't, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's really important to say no, especially when your gut's pretty good at telling you where you should go and why, and you sometimes got to listen to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So our specialty is in emotional intelligence, and what we know in the science of emotional intelligence is that gut feeling is actually your emotions telling you a message. And your emotions are faster at telling you a message than your logical portion of your brain. So your amygdala is the first point of the brain that your sensory intake hits. And that happens in it's a split nanosecond. It's so quick. Your body knows whether something's right or not. But as we grow up, we're actually really good at pushing that information away. And when you have a look at a side profile of the brain, you see the amygdala is right near the base. And it's actually got to go through the language center before it reaches the prefrontal cortex, which is your logic center, before you can make a decision based on facts and figures. So you're actually better off trusting that gut feel before it gets to a logic center and then you can back it up with logic, right? But if you choose to ignore the information, it's actually very valuable information.
Incredible. I hadn't thought of the science of gut checking. I thought that was maybe a bit frou-frou and out there, but it sounds like you've done the research on it. It's it's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel Goldman wrote about this about 35 years ago now, and there's been so much research in this space. And the way we approach emotional intelligence is we actually look at the neurobiology. And everyone says, "Oh, I'm not emotionally intelligent," or I don't want to have emotions. And everybody has emotions. It's how you survive as a human being. So
I don't want emotions. That seems kind of counterproductive. Like if you want to get through your day, you kind of need to not ram all those things down and maybe deal with a couple of them as you go.
Correct.
Interesting. Ooh.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference? Say a lot of the people that are part of this are innovators and content creators group, and a lot of people that I work with are small business owners that work from home. Do you think there's a difference in approach for people who work from home, perhaps to people in an office or in a shop or something in a different setting?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're really looking at here is the relationship dynamics and the shift in relationship dynamics, because who you would refer to as your partner and your children previously to working from home suddenly become your colleagues between the hours of 9 to 5, right? Yeah. And the relationships dynamics change and the way we work changes as well. And I think, number one, you have to look at your mindset and understand that it is not work from home, and that literal translation of taking yourself out of an office and placing yourself at home and then working from 9 to 5 and expecting it to be that experience. So there's a degree of flexibility there in that space. Secondly, with those boundaries as well, it's important to actually carve out an environmental boundary for yourself, a proper office. You can't expect the dining room table to be the office, the dining room table, the boardroom table, all of that. It's not sustainable over a long period of time. And secondly, it's a visual clue for people. The other people in the house see that as a place to eat, not for a place for you to work. So even if you've got to clean out a walk-in wardrobe and take all the contents out of it and you call that your office, or whether you find the spare bedroom and you put a proper desk in there and a proper office chair in there and you call that your workspace, I think that's not really important as well. The third thing is also to include visual clues for yourself and for your family members as well, which means I refuse to work in my pajamas. So I've worked remotely now throughout my career. My team all work remotely as well. We all work from home and have always done so. So we're well versed in this. And when COVID hit, everyone was calling us going, what do we do? How do we do this? And we said, oh, we've got you, because we've been doing this for years. Sorry?
Just be like us. We're already doing it. Just do this.
Yeah, we're already doing it. Just welcome to the club. But I think it's really important to put on work clothes, to put on a signal for yourself that you're not working in your pajamas. So I get changed. I put on, my work clothes. For some of the people that we've been coaching as well, we've actually asked them to walk out the front door and walk back in again. And when you walk in, you're actually in the framework of walking back into work. And then at the end of the day, doing the same thing. There's a lot of writing about this and research that's called the third space, which is creating a gap between activities so that you can transition. And it's an important time strategy as well. So quite often you'll do back-to-back meetings and your headspace is still in that previous meeting and it hasn't transferred into this meeting. By having 1 or 2 minutes to yourself and you're in that third space, it allows you to transfer. So that's another good little side tip as well for time management. And then the last tip that I have to give in regards to this and setting boundaries is we have family stand-ups. So we stand up as a family and we have a look at what everyone's schedule looks like, where the flexibility is and where the demands are, and we run it as a whole calendar. So I'll have spots where I'm working and where my husband will be doing the main parenting duties, and then we'll swap. Alternatively, we'll organise care for the children and then we'll both be working. But we have this one unified calendar that the entire family can see and work off of. And we make sure that we're communicating on that on a daily basis. So every morning we do a stand-up at the kitchen table, and we say, what's your run sheet for today? Where are the overlaps? Are there any issues that we need to be aware of? And then at the end of every week, we make sure we do a debrief. What went well? What didn't go well? What do we need to know for next week? And people go, well, that's really strange. You know, that's how you run a project or something along those lines. So, hey, if it's good enough to run multi-billion-dollar projects at mining companies, it's good enough for our household. And I think it's an important tool to be able to use.
Definitely, especially like that. That's some serious boundary setting for not for your children, as in to set them off, but so they understand what their duties are in the family as well. So is it a physical calendar, or is it like on devices, or a bit of both, or how does it?
So it's on a device, and what we do is just pop the laptop up and we kind of just look through it. And then each day, because as with lots of kids, there's lots of extracurricular activities and whatnot, we just run through it in the morning so that everyone knows what their expectations are for that day, who's picking you up. So something along those lines is discussed, anything that we need to know for tomorrow, any reminders for that day. And it's amazing because by spending 5 minutes in the morning going through it, and at the end of the week, capping that off and looking back and going, oh, we did really well this week, guys, because not every week's perfect. You know, I've been called on numerous occasions by Kindy to go, hey, who's picking up your daughter today? Because that happens, right? Something like, you know, a meeting runs over time and then she's not being picked up on time. So life happens and we're not all perfect. I'd never say that we were. So at the end of the week, we look back and we're reflecting and go, what did we do well and what didn't we do well and what do we need to make sure we do for next week? So, and I think these are important. These are meaningful connections in the family and having that open sense of communication. Yeah. I think with boundaries, quite often we have an expectation that we haven't communicated to somebody. And sometimes I think this is where we have that unfair expectation. Just because I'm in a relationship with you, you should be able to read my mind. You should be able to know that was my expectation at that point in time. You should have known that was my boundary. And I think by having this open dialogue and this genuine connection, you're able to actually remove yourself from that misinterpretation of that relationship, right? That an unfair expectation that they should be able to read your mind in that instance.
Well, I expect it daily. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's it, right?
No, that sounds super productive. Because that sets out your whole day. It ties in beautifully, actually, with the other tips that we've had about time blocking in particular. And like this time is personal time, this time is travel time, like the transition time you've been speaking about as well. Like it all ties in really beautifully. I'm going to be so organised by the time I'm done speaking to all you. Great. Who cares about anyone else? Yeah. Oh, so do you have a particular program that you use, or is it just like a normal calendar that you use for
calendar? It's just a Google Calendar, and we invite each other on the Google Calendar. For my son, he's got little alerts that come up. So in the morning, he's got an alert that links in with the Google Home that tells him when he needs to do things, because he's 7, he's a boy, he gets distracted by his Lego. And quite frankly, we just got sick and tired of telling him it's time to get ready for school. So now Google does it instead as a reminder. So I say use it. Yeah.
Stop playing with your Lego. I can see the AI benefit there. Like I have often said to my children, they're hot still, but I've often said, maybe I should just record this. And you've actually taken that a step further and just got Google to deal with it. That's solid, man.
Yeah. So Google prompts them to do their process in the morning. So it actually says to them, do your process. And what I actually have for my kids, and you guys are welcome to take this if you've got kids, is I've got pre-laminated sheets that have visual prompters for my kids as to what they need to do of a morning, and then I've mapped it out per day. So on a Monday, Tuesday, my daughter goes to kindy, but on a Thursday she does ballet, and so her days are different. The prompters are different of what she needs to do. But then it walks them through the whole day, and they're able to check that off as a checklist. So by the time they come downstairs, they would have done their entire checklist, and then they're ready for breakfast and cartoons before they go to school. And then they've got a checklist for packing their bags to go to school. And so it's this idea, and I think this is really important as well for boundary setting, if we go back to that topic, it's actually empowering your people to do things for themselves. I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old who are able to follow it. And quite often, if you just do this with adults, believe it or not, adults are capable of doing it too. Trust them with the process.
Yes.
And I think this is, it's a big learning for people, is that, you know, to trust people to be able to carry out a process, to empower them to do things themselves.
Sure. There's also a dopamine response, isn't there, to ticking things off your to-do list?
Correct. Yeah. So my kids love it. They love their whiteboard marker and marking it off. And then at the end of the day, you know, if we get out of the house at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is the time that we need to leave, they know they get a sticker on their reward chart as well. So there's this sense of being rewarded along the way, getting that dopamine along the way. But it's a sense of being able to be responsible for your own tasks and being accountable. And, you know, quite often I'll speak to other parents, and often, you know, small business owners are parents, right? You've made that decision not to work the 40-something hours a week for somebody else. You've started your own business. And they're not confident that their kids can do chores, number one, and number two, be able to do things for themselves. And my question always is this: if they can work an iPad, they can work a washing machine. You know, sorting out the clothes into colours is actually a learning step for them. It's, you know, teaching them colours. So don't be scared of utilising that as a resource as well, is to actually say to your kids, you know, show me what you can do too.
Sure. So I think they would thrive on being given those tasks and being seen as, you know, as an equal, or I don't know, as a valuable asset as part of the family unit, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about the house being a bit like a village, and everyone has a role to play in that village. And nobody gets to freeload in the village. Everybody has to contribute. And so is it, you know, you're carting the water in, or are you doing chores in our sense, right? But everybody contributes and nobody freeloads. And I think it's an important life lesson as well, because I run my organisation exactly the same way. I turn around and I ask my staff all the time, you know, how did you add value to the organisation this week? And they say the same thing to me. What did you do this week, Sarah, that added value to the organisation? And then I'm answerable to them just as they are answerable to me. And I think this is wonderful boundary setting, right? Because it's this idea of everyone being accountable and responsible for their own actions and their behaviours. It reduces the amount of management I actually have or need to have over other people.
Really interesting, because I'm experiencing a kind of panicky, warm sensation at the thought of having to answer that question, just because it's not something that I've practiced. It's possible that's maybe a common experience for people that are unfamiliar with setting boundaries really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a transition. It does take time to do. Quite often when this gets brought up as a coaching topic, it's anywhere between 3 to 6 months before people even get used to using the language and utilising the tools. And quite often they'll come back and they'll say, oh, it didn't work, Sarah. And I say, well, what did you do? And you know, how else could we approach it? And it's about learning that behaviour. It takes 66 days in a row of doing something to form a habit. People often don't understand that. They think, oh, I can have cheat days in between. If you cheat, starts back at zero again. But it's about habit forming, and it's a new language, it's a new paradigm, it's a new behaviour. And then what I often say to people is, what's the cost to you if you don't do it? So, you know, we often talk about what the benefits are of setting boundaries, but what's the cost? And the really real cost is you losing yourself. And there's nothing worse than not knowing who you are anymore, or feeling as if you're being pulled left, right and centre, and not being able to honour yourself anymore. It's not a very nice feeling to be in. So that is the very real cost when we don't set boundaries.
That's really powerful. I'm need to sort of sit and think with that, because I think that's a pretty common experience, especially as you become parents as well. For one thing, is that your needs kind of sit at the back for a bit while everyone else is growing and developing. But it's really important to still keep yourself in the picture as well, I guess.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I think that is one of those seismic shifts in life, isn't it? It's that shedding of identity of where you may have gone from wife or partner to suddenly now having a new title as well, which is mother, right? And then prior to that, you might have had a different title, which was general counsel, or, you know, so-and-so manager, or whatever your title was, or dentist, yeah? So we have all these titles that we wear, the masks that we wear, and what can happen is that shedding and transition, somewhere along the way, who you are fundamentally as a person gets lost in that. When I coach people, I liken it to little girls. When they're about 3, they start learning to dress themselves. And when they dress themselves, they also create chaos, pure chaos in their wardrobes and in their bedrooms, right? Because outfits just go everywhere. And they get lost and buried within all the outfits. And that's the exact analogy that I use, which is that there are so many hats and so many outfits that we wear that we're buried and we're lost somewhere in it. And it's this moment where you're choosing to honour and come back to who am I fundamentally as a person, myself.
That's way more important than just a business lesson either as well. That's everything. If you don't really have a good grasp of who you are, you're kind of floating through life a little bit. And it's good to come back and be grounded and have a framework for doing that, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So in emotional intelligence, we often talk about how are you showing up, and how are you showing up to your children? How are you showing up to your clients? How are you showing up to your staff? And if you don't have a strong sense of self-identity, it will impact subconsciously on the way you show up for others, because it will come across as a sense of either resentment or guilt.
Oh, you've just blown a lot of parenting wide open there.
Yeah.
Wow, aside from all the business stuff, I know we keep saying back to parenting, but the business side of it is, it's all kind of connected. As you say, you're not just one thing or another, it's all part of the whole. Do you think there's a bit of a shift with all the technology that's available to us now? Like there's some massive boundary setting needing to happen there, would you say?
Yeah, and I think also with COVID as well, as, you know, prior to COVID, Facebook was social predominantly, and LinkedIn was work, and then suddenly Facebook became work as well. And so this sense of something that you were engaging in a social aspect suddenly became a work aspect, and then potentially messages would be coming through at odd hours during the day as well. And then with technology, because not everybody's now working between 9 to 5, there's some people who start their days at 12 and then go to 8 o'clock at night. How should I respond to my emails? When should I be on? When should I be off? And one of the really quick tips that I give people is, in your signature block, is identify the hours that you work. And if they change, update your signature block. It's super simple, because it sets the expectations for people as to when you'll be available and when you won't be available. And nobody will guilt you for that, because it's quite clearly written there.
Nice.
The other one that I have as well is to have no phone time. So times where you actually put the phone away. I put mine on the charger and turn it off, and then that's it. It's done for the day. If I want to watch something in a social capacity or engage with something in a social capacity, I'll watch it on TV, I'll watch it on another device. I deliberately leave my phone and my laptop in my office, and then I walk away from my office at the end of the day, and it's like I've left it at work. So it's really big. So my laptop doesn't leave my office, and I don't take it into the house. And that's a deliberate choice for myself, because I know what I'm like. If I take it into the house, I'll just keep working. And so for me, it's a very important boundary to have.
Yeah, it's just that, like the notification noise. As soon as you hear that there's something come in that requires your attention, it's really difficult to switch off the thought pattern of, oh, I wonder what that is. I wonder what they need. What should I do? And if you simply don't receive the notification, then you can't.
You're none the wiser.
Yeah.
and you know, people go, oh, what if it's an emergency? If it's an emergency, you don't send a text message to 000. You call them. Right? So if it's an emergency, there are a couple of people who I would respond to an emergency. They have my home number, and they're the only people who have my home number. And so they would call me. And there's never been an occasion where somebody texted or emailed me that required immediate attention, that couldn't wait until the next morning. So I think sometimes we delude ourselves into how important we are. Thinking, hey, I have to answer that right away.
No, you're absolutely right. Because I have the reverse thing of like, well, I think nobody except telemarketers seems to have our home phone number. So, so I've always got my phone on and think, well, if anybody needs to contact us, they've got the mobile. But I think maybe a reversal of that is really the way to go, when you can turn your phone off. And if it's absolutely desperate, well, it's to either telemarketers or the people who really need you, and you'll be able to figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you come back to who are some close family and friends, they know where you live, they know what your phone number is at home. Yeah, genuinely, 9 times out of 10, those calls aren't that important. Put it this way, they're not important enough to not be spending that 20 minutes a month with your top 5 most important people in your life. And that's what I mean, right? So if we come back full circle to the beginning of the conversation of understanding who is it that you really want to be spending time with, and that's exactly what happens every time you pick up that phone and you send a quick text message or you make a quick phone call. What you're actually saying to that person who you really, really value is, you actually don't deserve my attention and time right now.
Oh, that cuts.
And that's why we draw boundaries.
Yeah, you're right. Because the phrase I just need to do one thing or the other, that has definitely exited my mouth on a daily basis. But you're absolutely right. What you're saying is, I just need to put somebody else's needs before yours or my own. Interesting.
Correct.
That's revelations all over the joint. I got some soul searching to do on top of all the other new tasks. I think that does bring us full circle. I think that's a really great place to kind of leave things, because there's a lot to unpack from just that amazing overview of where to start with boundary setting. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. We've covered some really brilliant topics in not a lot of time. What should we do if we want to sort of find out more about Kease International?
Yeah, jump onto our website, kease.com.au, alternatively theleaderslounge.com.au, and drop us a message, and let's chat further and see how we could help small businesses or people who just want to work on their time management. So,
and the boundaries, we know all about boundaries. Emotional intelligence is a skill set in itself, isn't it? So that's something definitely all could do with a bit of assistance on. But all of this information we'll include with our Thursday blog. So if you haven't gone to see Sarah between today, Monday, and the Thursday blog, you'll know where to find all the bits and pieces. Sarah, thanks so much for joining me.
Excellent.
Cool.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Hey, it's been wonderful. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.